Hi everybody, Adam here. So as you can probably see, I now have a slightly different desktop setup than previously. Got some new shelves that are, well, you can't see them, but they're right there. They're holding up the camera. They look great, I promise. They're just, right out of frame. You can't see them. Anyway, but it's kind of nice. Gives me a slightly different perspective here. And so you can see a little bit more going forward. Anyway, today I wanted to talk about the topic of soreness. In particular, how soreness from exercise, people tend to think that it is correlated very strongly with kind of the results that you're getting from the exercise, when the reality is that that is not actually the case. The two are a lot less correlated than people generally think. Due to these misconceptions about soreness, this creates a situation in which people do a thing which I call chasing soreness, which is to say that they are trying to maximize soreness from their training because they think that that is going to mean that they are maximizing the results that they're getting, when the reality is that very often this is holding them back over the long run. Before we get started, of course, don't hesitate to smash that like button, help level up the channel, vanquish the YouTube algorithm, and of course, bless all the Himbos around the world with a slight reduction in soreness. As always, I'm also generally accepting new online fitness coaching clients, so if you are interested, don't hesitate to reach out via the link below, and I will be in touch with you. So what is soreness to begin with? So I think a lot of people don't really think about this very much, but the reality is that soreness is not purely a physical phenomena, in the same way that pain is not actually a purely physical phenomena. People tend to think of pain as a physical phenomena in the sense that, for example, you poke yourself, you feel it because it's actually affecting, the tissue of your hand somehow. Like the tissue of your hand is reacting. When the reality is that what happens is that you've got these nerve sensors. The nerve sensors sense that something is happening, it relays a signal to the brain, and then the brain decides what to do with that signal. And so in fact, the brain can sometimes react more strongly or less strongly to the same signal, just based on what's going on in the environment and how important it decides that that signal is. So if, for example, you've got a pain signal coming in, but you've got a much bigger pain signal coming in from somewhere else, then of course that means that very likely you're going to ignore the smaller one and focus more on the larger one because that seems more like the pressing issue right now. Of course, this is a joke I remember from a kid watching the movie Major Pain, which is a comedy. Basically, it's about this really, really tough army guy who's constantly doing inappropriate things in everyday life. And he has this trick, to make people forget about pain that they're in. And the trick is that he'll typically go break their finger or something like that. And then they'll go, you just broke my finger. And he goes, yeah, but now you don't remember the other thing. So of course, this is a really good demonstration of the concept. Very often your brain has a lot of signals coming in. It has to prioritize what to really be doing with anything at any given moment and which kinds of signals it wants to say, are really important and which aren't. This doesn't mean, of course, that pain is all in your head or anything like that, but it does mean that basically there are ways that things can get a little bit out of whack. So when you're talking about things like pain syndromes, disorders where basically the brain is incredibly overreactive to pain signals. And so it basically just dials everything up to a 10, and as a result you get a lot more pain out of everything, or you have chronic pain issues and so on, when there's not really necessarily any stimulus that's causing it. It's just that your brain is kind of like a very jumpy, anxious thing, and it's jumping at every single thing that it sees. So in part, recovery from pain is not just about actually physical tissue healing from an attack or something like that. It's also very often just about convincing your brain that it is okay to use that tissue again, which is to say that you have to actually use it to kind of convince your brain that, hey, everything's fine here. I'm not going to get a crap ton of additional pain if I, continue moving in this area. And of course, as noted, there can be things like your emotional state, your environment, the level of stress that you're under can impact the amount of pain that you experience from basically the same injury or the same stimulus. I know that I've been talking a lot right now just about pain and how pain works, but the reality is that soreness is kind of something similar, and that's kind of why I wanted to start off with that. So soreness is a thing where essentially your brain knows that you've basically just really worked out muscles really hard, you've potentially damaged them a bit, and as a result, they need to recover. And while they are recovering, your brain thinks, okay, well, you don't want to use that muscle again because that's going to impair the recovery. It's going to further damage it. We don't want to do that right now. So what the brain does is it generates some soreness to help you protect that area. basically to, convince you, if you've done, just a really hard day of squats and you're really sore, your legs really hurt, it's basically saying, hey, don't squat again today. You don't want to do that. That's just going to hurt more. That's just going to make things worse. But at the same time, much like what happens with pain, your brain can overreact a bit, or it can underreact. It will, again, dial that up or down a little bit, just depending on how it's, reacting to the situation, what is going on. And so part of the thing that happens is that when you're training regularly, basically you experience something that we call the repeated bouts effect, which is essentially that your brain gets more and more used to the fact that you're training, say squatting from the previous example, you're squatting regularly every few days. And so your brain gets to the point where it's like, okay, we can recover from this pretty quickly. This is a stimulus that we know. This is a stimulus that we've seen a bunch before. We don't have to turn up the soreness all the way. We can just kind of keep that restricted a little bit. And yeah, you might experience a bit of soreness here and there if, for example, you push yourself really hard. But at the end of the day, your brain recognizes that having a ton of soreness all the time is bad news. It's basically just preventing you from performing to your maximum. Now, at this point, there are lots of ways that we can actually increase soreness. So, of course, like I just mentioned, one of them is simply to train a lot harder than usual. If you greatly increase your training volume compared to what your body is used to, then obviously that is going to be a shock. That is going to cause some excess muscle damage. And that, of course, is then going to require some excess recovery. And of course, there's going to be a bit more soreness than usual. Another one is simply taking time off. So if you take a week or two off and then you return to training, obviously you've had a little bit less time where your brain is used to all that activity. You've gotten a little bit more resensitized to that kind of activity. And so therefore, you go back to the gym, you squat again, and you're sore again because, again, you've just had a bit of time off. That's pretty normal. And then the other major one is simply if you are training a lot with a lot of different kinds of movement. So for example, let's say that you're training with a very particular back squat for a while, and then you switch over to a front squat. You're still using a lot of the same muscle mass, but now you're training the muscle mass in a slightly different way. And because you've got that slightly different stimulus coming in, that's going to then again just cause the body to not be used to that exact stimulus and therefore generate more soreness because it wants to protect you and make sure everything's okay. Another one is eccentric focused exercise. So typically when you perform an exercise, there are 3 phases to any movement. There is a concentric phase, which is basically raising the weight, which is basically overcoming resistance. There is the isometric phase, which is basically any time that you're stopped, whether that's because you're just pausing in an end range of motion, or because maybe you are, pushing as hard as you can, but you can't overcome gravity, and so as a result, you're basically just staying in the same place. And then there is the eccentric phase, which is basically when you are then lowering the weight under control down to the bottom of the end range of motion. And the thing is that eccentric focused exercise is not normal for most people. Most exercise we think of as concentric focus, which means that we focus on actually lifting the weight as opposed to lowering the weight. But eccentric focused exercise is possible. There are ways to emphasize the eccentric phase of a movement. For example, by doing a forced, really slow rep, on the way down, doing something like, for example, overloading, so putting on more weight on the bar than you could normally handle, and then basically having someone help you with the concentric phase, and then focusing on doing the eccentric phase all by yourself. There is an interesting effect that has been seen in studies where eccentric phase lifting, focused lifting, generates more soreness. And there are a bunch of reasons for that. It's complicated. A lot of people in the past have guessed that this might also mean that it means that the eccentric focused exercises are better for building muscle mass. The reality is that's really not the case, and that's again a really complicated thing to get into at another time. But the important thing to understand is that it's also possible to just generate a crap ton of soreness by switching over from concentric focused exercises to eccentric focused exercises. So from the above examples, you can tell that basically there are plenty of ways to generate soreness. The question is, do these methods for generating soreness generate additional results? Which is to say that as you do things that generate more soreness than usual, is that actually going to mean that you're getting more results? Taking time off periodically in the form of a deload or a training break or whatever the case is a good thing. It helps your body to rest and recover. It helps you prepare for hard training. And it's just, in general, a good idea. At the same time, that only works because, at the end of the day, you're expected to be training most of the time. Like a break from training works if, the training itself is the majority of the time. And the training itself, the majority of the time, is what gets you the results. So, in this case, if you were taking breaks, excess breaks, just to get added soreness out of it, that's obviously going to be a detriment. It's just going to be taking away from the time that you are spending actually training, actually progressing, and actually improving. And so it's obviously not a good way to, enhance your results. Yes, a little bit of a break here and there is a good thing, but that doesn't mean that more breaks are going to be better. You can imagine somebody who takes this to the extreme example and maybe trains once every other week or once every 2 weeks or something like that. Sorry, those are the same thing. My brain just... once every 2 weeks or once every 3 weeks or something like that. That's not going to be productive. That's not going to be useful because that's just not how your body likes to train and progress. Training significantly harder than you're used to also doesn't necessarily provide better results. So this one is one that maybe goes more against what people tend to think. People tend to think that training hard is what gets you results, when the reality is that it's not necessarily about training hard. It's about training consistently. It's about making small adjustments and progressions in effort over time and having that build up to something, as opposed to just grinding yourself down, trying to accomplish, training as hard as possible in every single given day. Doing a huge jump in terms of volume performed or effort put in may be hardcore, but it also basically means A, you're increasing your risk of injury because you're doing stuff your body's not really used to, and B, you're also massively increasing the recovery cost of performing those activities. And the problem is that it's not a simple, generate as much stimulus as you can, therefore get as much adaptation as you can. There is a range at which basically you can overwhelm your body's ability to adapt, overwhelm your recovery abilities, and therefore actually get less results simply because you are doing too much too quickly. So a really interesting study basically found that, part of the reason beginners don't really see serious results for at least the first few weeks of training is because their body is so overwhelmed by the fact that they're doing this whole new exercise thing. Their body's not used to this kind of stimulus at all. It's very stressed out, it's very sore, it's very overwhelmed. There's a huge recovery burden in terms of just getting everything on track. And so it takes a while, it takes a few weeks for your body to actually get used to that, so then it can start adapting. So as a result, you don't really see much in the way of muscle gains in the first few weeks of training for beginners. You can still see strength gains because there are other things that drive strength gains that are neurological in nature and that can happen faster, but muscle gains tend to be slower, and that's because, again, your body is just overwhelmed by all the recovery it has to do, by all the stuff that it has to do. And so if you are, trying to mimic that, that phase, by basically just constantly overloading yourself with way too much effort, you can tell how that's, generally not going to provide you results because your body simply cannot adapt to that level of stress that quickly. It takes time. You need to get your body accustomed to it slowly by adapting with little bits and pieces here and there, little tiny progressions, and then sticking to it over a longer period of time. Slow and steady wins the race at the end of the day. Next one is simply that constantly switching up the training type that you're doing, this violates the principle of specificity, which is one of the primary drivers of adaptation. So the principle of specificity says that basically, if I want to get better at, for example, squatting, then the best way to do that is to squat regularly every few days or so for a long period of time. If I'm doing a squat one day and then a front squat and then I'm doing a eccentric squat, and then, if I'm constantly switching up what kind of squat I'm doing, yes, I'm still going to build muscle mass, yes, I'm still going to build some strength, but it's not going to be as ideal because I'm not basically just doing the same thing over and over again and, giving my body the chance to continually adapt to it. This is kind of how the concept of muscle confusion got invented. So the whole idea of muscle confusion is that you constantly switch up the exercises that you're doing, you get as much soreness as possible out of the equation, and then because, people think that muscle soreness is then therefore what actually drives progression, then therefore that means that you are going to get optimal results from that. That's not true. It violates that principle of specificity, and it actually is the opposite. It is actually holding you back. It's actually better to just keep doing things for a stable period of time, a month or two at a time. Yes, you can still do some variety in there. Yes, you still want to change out your exercises periodically as they get stale, but you want to stick with them for at least a month or two so you can give your body time to continually adapt, as opposed to just constantly switching things up on it. And then the last is simply eccentric exercise. Again, I could go into a whole other video about eccentric exercise itself, but the reality is that eccentric exercise has been shown in studies to not necessarily be any better for increasing the amount of muscle you're building, the amount of strength that you're building. In particular also because when we think of strength, mostly we think of concentric strength. Again, we think of lifting a weight as being strong. We do not think of, carefully putting down a weight as being strong. And so what we find is, again, kind of referring back to the principle of specificity I was just talking about, is that if you're going to train specifically with lots of eccentric exercise, you get really good at doing a lot of eccentric exercise. You certainly build some muscle mass, but it doesn't mean that you're any good at building strength in the concentric phase, and therefore you're not building as much strength as you possibly could. So it's definitely really suboptimal in terms of building strength. So all of this is to say, at the end of the day, it's important to understand that soreness does not necessarily actually correlate with results. Soreness is a kind of neurological feedback mechanism that is generated by your brain in concert with everything else going on in your body to help protect yourself, to help prevent you from overdoing it, from overworking yourself, from stressing and potentially injuring yourself. And because it's a very specific kind of system, it can be kind of gamed in ways. You can certainly abuse the system to generate more soreness. The problem is that those ways for gaming the system are, again, not necessarily things that correlate with what we know to be the rules of good training that actually produces results over time. And in many cases, it violates those rules of, again, good training that is going to give us results over time. The reality is that many lifters who lift very consistently for a very long time get to a point where they're really not that sore. I've gone through long phases where I just wasn't sore that much at all for months at a time because I just kept consistently training. I wasn't changing up my training too much, and therefore there wasn't anything too much in the way of, necessarily incredibly new stimulus. And therefore, you'd think, if soreness were the marker, then clearly I wasn't gaining any results at all. But that's not true. I continued building muscle, I continued building strength, I continued seeing progress towards my goals, even though, again, I was not seeing much of any soreness. And that is generally how it is when someone is a pretty well-trained, elite athlete or something like that. They just get to a point where their bodies are pretty used to the kind of training that they do, and therefore they don't get that sore. And so conversely, the reality is that actually not getting sore is kind of the best situation. Not getting sore is good for you because it means that you can train hard, you're not having it disrupt your ordinary everyday life, and you can keep doing that, and you can keep doing that, and so on. So, as always, I hope you liked today's video. Don't hesitate to smash that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell. Don't hesitate to comment below. Let me know what you want to see in future videos. I will talk to you all next week. Have a good one.